Great. Good morning, everybody. Welcome, all 125 of you. Fabulous that you're here. My name's Richard, and I'm just going to introduce the day for a few minutes before handing over to our keynote speaker. Firstly, an enormous thank you to all of you for giving up your Saturday morning and being here to explore how the constituency of Ludlow hits net zero by the year 2030. That's in just 8 years, 7 months and 9 days time. Yeah, my name is Richard and I'm honoured to be your chair today. And I'll be joined as co-host by the amazing Jane Cullen, who has led, cajoled and only very occasionally prodded the equally amazing group of humans who have created and published the world's very first constituency-based plan to deliver net zero, the South Shropshire Climate Action Plan. And today you'll be taken 9,147 miles to the Solomon Islands, where we'll hear directly from Gladys Habu on the front line of human-induced climate change. And you'll also be taken to St. Peter's College, Oxford University, where you'll hear from Ken Addison, Dr. Ken Addison, Emeritus Fellow in Earth and Climate System Science. And you'll be brought back to the most important place, to Shropshire, to South Shropshire and the constituency of Ludlow, where we'll hear from your MP, Philip Dunne, Chair of the influential Environmental Audit Committee. In between, you'll also hear from the conveners of each of the theme of the report. And you'll get the chance to explore an area of interest a bit later in detail in a breakout session at 11:10. And you'll have the chance to ask questions. And for those of you, I'm sure all of you have used Zoom to death in the last 15 months. But if you could just discover where the chat function is, any questions you have to delegates will be submitted via the chat function. And in the last hour of the conference, we want to explore the tricky question of what do we do on Monday? What's different because of this report? And there are 3 ideas we'd like to explore with you to essentially listen to the voice of this conference. And the first idea is a focus on catalyzing enlightened self-interest across the patch, helping people do more of the right things. The second idea is focusing on campaigning and lobbying to create perhaps the political space to allow our politicians to be more ambitious. The third and final idea is to make the constituency of Ludlow a net zero futures zone, a sort of petri dish that focuses on fostering solutions and innovations that seek to deliver the future ahead of schedule, so we can help others to do the same and to bring first mover advantages to your place, to South Shropshire. But I'll be setting out more of these options a bit later on. We will break at 11 for 10 minutes. We'll also be recording the conference today, including the breakout session. So if you'd prefer not to appear in the recording, you please keep your camera off. We'll also a bit later be using an online voting tool called Mentimeter. And maybe if you could have a smartphone handy or a tab open on your computer or iPad, I'll tell you a bit how to interface with that later. So just a couple of quick thank yous. Just like to give a massive thank you, or thank you vel, as I should say, to Esme Begerman, who's providing technical support from another nation on the front line of human-induced climate change, the Netherlands. But I think it's time to get started properly. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Gladys Habu to the conference. Gladys is a pharmacist in the Solomon Islands at the National Referral Hospital. Also Miss Solomon Islands in 2019-2020. She's a UNICEF Pacific supporter and supports the work of the Pacific Island students fighting climate change. So fabulous to have you here. Thank you. Gladys is already in the future by 10 hours, so it's her evening. I'll hand over to you, Gladys. Welcome.
Thank you. Can I just confirm if you can hear me clearly?
We can hear you clearly.
Perfect. I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right. Good morning, everyone. I bring you warm greetings from my home country here in the Solomon Islands, the beautiful Happy Isles in the South Pacific. My name is Gladys, as you've heard, and I am so humbled to be here. Please allow me this time to say thank you to Lorna, Jane, and Lizzie for putting in so much effort into making this experience possible for me. It is an absolute honor to be your keynote speaker to launch the Next Steps plan by the South Shropshire Climate Action Team for the Ludlow constituency. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. Like all of you, I too come from a rural community, so I will be giving you a brief perspective of what it is like facing the climate crisis from a Solomon Islanders view. Views are my own and not affiliated or not part of any organization that I am affiliated with. So I hope you learn as much as possible from this. I'll start off by just sharing a brief background of Solomon Islands, just to give you some understanding of where I come from. And then I'll share with you some examples of the impacts of climate change in our community and how this has sort of helped to drive my climate advocacy. And towards the end, before we close, we'll come to talk about why it is significant that we are all working to build a climate safe future for all of us, and how your Next Steps plan ties in well into helping us achieve this future. So Solomon Islands has been for a while part of the British, or it was a British protectorate until July 7th in 1978 when we gained our independence. We have 10 provinces and over 900 plus different islands scattered within our archipelago. So as you can see in the image on the side, Solomon Islands is in the heart of Oceania, which many climate advocates like to call the blue continent, since we've got more ocean than we do land mass in our part of the world. We have a population of over 721,000, very culturally diverse, and we speak over 70 different languages. Thankfully, English is still our official language for study and work purposes, so we can communicate with all of you around the world. So I come from Santa Isabel. It is the longest island here in Solomon Islands, and we only have about 35,000 people. Our village is called Kia. It's in northwest of Santa Isabel province, and as you can see in the image, most of our people live in traditionally built houses on stilts above the water. So you can start to imagine what sea level rise has or impacts on our people. Since the pre-industrial times, global carbon dioxide emission has reached over 1.65 trillion tons, and only 10.16 million tons come from the Solomon Islands, which is a very negligible figure. As you can see, it's less than 0.01% of all emissions. And yet we are one of the countries that is facing the direct consequences of climate change at the front line. We feel that this is very unfair, but communities like yours who are taking ambitious steps to building back better mean a lot to us, and therefore very grateful to be part of this significant a moment for your constituency. Sadly, you know, for us and all of us around the world, it really, the changing climate is becoming a daily challenge for our people. So the following slides now will be an illustration of the impact of climate change in our village, and all photos shared are my own. Firstly, rising sea levels. Here you can see our outdoor kitchen and my younger brother who's playing outside. This is back in 2005 when we first experienced one of the highest tides we've ever seen. It destroyed our kitchen back then, and we were forced to build a new one. Our habitats are also disappearing as well. So these are a couple photos that I took just a few meters from where I stay, of our mangrove ecosystems being completely destroyed. This used to be home to many species, including mud clams and mud crabs that are part of our diet. Unfortunately, today they are now dead and this area is barren. The ocean is also warming up, so you can see the impact of coral reefs bleaching. And this is reported widespread throughout the country and other Pacific Island countries as well. So definitely our marine life is threatened, both quantity and quality wise. And climate change is also disrupting our agriculture, which I'm sure that you are also seeing in your community as well. So unpredictable and extreme weather patterns are affecting our crop yield, such as very long periods of hot weather or flash flooding during cyclone season. This is altering our traditional diet. It is impacting on our income from harvest and ultimately affecting our food security. So you're probably now wondering, okay, what really drives my climate advocacy? You see, many islands in the Pacific are disappearing, and the loss of our beloved Kale is my drive for climate advocacy. Kale Island was home to my grandparents a couple of generations back, and according to the scientist Dr. Simon Albert and his colleagues from Queensland University, who did some studies in Northwest Isabel, Kale used to be 12 acres. In a matter of 5 years, Kale disappeared. So this is photos that I took one day when we decided to go for a picnic, and it was just no longer there, which is really, really, really sad for us.
Will you show the
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
So you've seen this one, yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so today this is what Kale looks like. June, July is usually when we have the lowest tides during the day, so you can see a little bit of sand. But by December, this is when we get highest tides during the day. And if you look closely enough, you'll see some birds on the dead stamp. They too don't have a home anymore, which is quite sad. So these last few minutes, I will share with you a little bit on what we're doing in our own capacity to protect what we have left in our little settlement. So we relocated our old house to a new area, and we've built up on higher and stronger stilts with more permanent building materials so it could last longer. But unfortunately, the sea level rise issue continues to be a problem for us. Then we also built stone walls along the coast to protect from further erosion, and we planted mangroves as well. So by 2020, there's a bit more greenery than there was in 2012. We also built stilted walkways to avoid having to walk through the sea when the tide comes up each day. And that's a picture of myself nailing the planks together, helping my dad and brother. And this is just a few photos to show what it is like day in, day out. So high tide, low tide, and same here as well. You know, unfortunately, our efforts are very limited. Many communities can only do so much. Here are a few photos from another island in the Solomons, and you can see not only are there root crops dying, but sea level rise is also taking away taboo sites such as graveyards, and it's exposing remains of those who have gone before us, which is even more sad. Honestly, time is running out, and I've selected these two images to show the urgency to all of you, and this was taken during my community awareness with the UNICEF team in a village in Malaita province. So the photo up here with the vehicle is taken at 1 p.m. when we arrived at our location for the awareness talk. And in a matter of 3 hours, we couldn't take the vehicle back because the whole area was just covered in seawater. Imagine what this place would be like in the next 10 years or so. We definitely need your help. Unfortunately, many communities struggle to adapt to these challenges. Although we are fighters and we are doing our best, we have limited relocation options, limited resources and support. And the image on the side there is a recent photo I took of myself to show the amount of plastic waste that's being washed up on the shore. And in my hand is a bleached coral as well. And I'm thinking, you know, we are a region of relatively low carbon footprint, yet we are paying a very high price whilst the rest of the world continues to develop unsustainably and rapidly. So with all of that, honestly, the South Shropshire's Climate Action Next Steps Plan is indeed a significant step forward, and I'm inspired by all the work that your community has done. And I know my people, many of my people will also appreciate this. What you and your community is doing will touch many people worldwide, especially us here in the Pacific, because at the end of the day, Earth is our home, and together our collective efforts will build a climate-safe future for all. So with that, I want to say that with all the work that you're doing, none of it is too small. Every single step that you take is part of a far greater effort that many of us are taking around the world to build our planet back better. And now more than ever, this global pandemic gives us the opportunity to live a new normal, a greener normal. And so I'd like to say congratulations to South Shropshire Climate Action and the Ludlow constituency on your Next Steps plan to reach net zero by 2030. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Gladys. Could we give a round of applause? That was just beautiful. Thank you ever so much. And are you able to stay a little while? Great. Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay, take questions if you want. I'll stay for at least an hour to hear you out because I really appreciate what you're doing.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, we'll come to questions in a little while, but given timing, we'll move on now to hear from the wonderful conveners of this report. We have Nick, Simon, John and Ali, and we're going to essentially, I'll just introduce each of them, ask them a question just to kind of soften the day a little bit, and then they'll get 2 minutes to give us all a briefing on their particular chapter of the report. So I'd love to introduce Nick Reed, OBE, who leads the land and biodiversity theme. Nick is an ordained Anglican priest with degrees in agricultural science and forestry. Nick has a background in research and rural policy and was formerly food policy and research advisor for the NFU, and is also CEO of a fantastic organization called the Bright Space Foundation. And Nick, we'd all like to know what current fact about your life would most impress your 5-year-old self?
Okay, oddly enough, that I'm here and that I'm speaking confidently, because as a child, I was actually incredibly shy. And I was able to perform. I took part in, you know, singing and acting and so on, but I didn't have any sort of self-confidence when it came to talking to people face to face. Whereas now, as you said, I'm an Anglican priest, and as I've matured, I've grown in confidence. So the fact that I'm here talking to you and I didn't lose any sleep about it the night before.
Fantastic. That's lovely, Nick. Thank you ever so much. And next, Simon. Introduce Simon Ross. Simon leads the Sustainable Energy and Climate Change Charity, March's Energy Agency, and also leads the Energy and Buildings theme. And Simon, the question to you is what book are you reading right now?
Richard, good morning. Good morning, everybody. I've recently finished a book by a Scottish broadcaster and writer called Alison entitled Riders on the Storm. And he's subtitled the book The Climate Crisis and the Survival of Being. So a bit of light reading, but I've read several of his books in the past, and there's a wonderful intersection for me of grounding our response in the established science, which for him is based upon the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And I love the intersection as well with land, community, soul and spirit that he brings to everything he does. And I find that wonderfully inspirational, and I draw a lot of strength from it. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Simon. Next to John Whitelegg, who leads the transport theme. John is visiting Professor of Sustainable Transport at Liverpool John Moores University and Professor of Sustainable Development at the University of York's Stockholm Environment Institute. And the question to you, John, is what would the title of your autobiography be and why?
Oh, hello, everybody. Good morning. I hope this is working okay. First of all, this is a very dangerous question because it reveals kind of inner secrets about one's motivation and probably excessive egotistical smugness. But I've often thought of doing this, and I haven't yet done it, anything like an autobiography. But the title I've played with for a couple of years is Failure is Not an Option. And I've had a very interesting, privileged career. I've been very lucky in the things I've done. So, for example, I was told that it was impossible to stop British Rail closing the Settle Carlisle railway line in the 1980s. And I set up a campaign group and I chaired it for 6 years and we won. We defeated British Rail and we defeated the UK government. I was told I would never be elected as a councillor because my views are too strident and people only vote for councillors who are a bit wimpy. I was elected as a councillor and became a cabinet member in a city council. I was told we would never get 20 miles per hour on every residential street for 1 million people in Lancashire. We did it and it worked. And I'm now being told we won't get 20 miles per hour in Shropshire and we won't get zero carbon in Shropshire, but we will. We will get them both. It's only a matter of time. Failure is not an option.
Fantastic. I'll buy the book when you've finished writing it. Great. And finally to Ali Weeks. Ali leads the Communities and Education theme. And Ali is a director of, again, another fabulous organisation, Lightfoot, an environmental scientist and lives near Clun. And I'd like to know, Ali, who is your favourite climate change champion and why? Oh, you're muted, Ali.
You're mute.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I have to say that my climate change champion is Greta Thunberg. And the reason for that is because she's so clear in her message and also her sense of urgency is always there. And that I think is something that we can't always hold. And when she speaks, what I think afterwards is, well, what can we do? How can we do it? How can we actually make the changes that absolutely need to be done? And I think that's the greatest challenge. And she always makes me think of the how immediately following anything that she says.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ali, and welcome. Like to give the spotlight now back to Nick, who'd like to bring to life the land and biodiversity theme that he's elegantly convened on behalf of the group. Over to you, Nick.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to my colleagues who helped me write this. We've accepted that food production is an important contributor to greenhouse gases, about 10%, but it's critical to the solution, and particularly in the way that carbon can be sequestered or stored within the soil. And Shropshire offers huge potential for carbon sequestration. To address the climate and ecological crisis, we've got to do two major things. The first is to stop dividing the landscape into small silos of high biodiversity, surrounded by large areas of productive land, but low biodiversity, as nature recovery will depend on there being sufficient critical mass across the whole of the landscape, and that includes woodlands, hedgerows, green infrastructure and gardens. And secondly is that we need to produce food, because obviously we have to feed ourselves, in ways that combine with ecology rather than fight with ecology. The good news is that there are practices already in South Shropshire which seek to do those things. Many of the farmed landscape in the area shaped historically has been shaped through methods of farming that integrate agriculture and ecology, which we refer to as high nature value or agroecological approaches. Second piece of good news is there's an opportunity to influence government policy because the design of post-Brexit farming policy is in train at the moment. So if possible, we could secure resources to promote this approach. And the third piece of good news is that if we achieve this, it will enhance a load of public goods, not just carbon, but clean air, water, landscape quality, and so on. And within the report, we've provided a menu of opportunities rather than a blueprint, because every farm is different. There's loads of landscape and so on. And it's to try and encourage local food producers and land managers to look at the options for their farm and to assess how to go forward. So we've got a traffic light system that we've put in place, and we're promoting policy and community actions to support this agroecological approach. So we hope people will use it to stimulate debate rather than feel that there's a doctrinaire approach, and take it forward from there.
Fabulous, Nick. And if the 134 people listening to you right now could do just one thing to help with this vision of the future, what might that be?
Well, if it's 134 people, then I think one of the critical things is the diet that we eat, because the diet sets the market. And, you know, farmers produce in order to grow what people want to eat. So there are dietary choices. And again, in the report, we highlight that. Not everyone is a farmer, but everyone eats. So looking at your diet and looking at your own consumption and using that to influence future markets and supporting this transition to agroecology is something that everyone can do.
Fantastic. Jane, do you have a question for Nick?
Yes, Nick, you have a very interesting section on hedgerows in the report. And I don't want to take that as an example. How do you think that this skills gap that there is in looking after the landscape can be filled?
Well, I think there's two things. The first is the value that we attach to hedgerows. Are they a hindrance, or are they a necessary part of landscape management? And I think if we can get more people to appreciate the benefits of having hedgerows, then they'll look after them better. And the second is that there has to be some additional resource put in terms of training and skilling, because it isn't easy to manage a hedgerow properly, but there are people who do it. So we would encourage sort of peer-to-peer groups to develop. And also, you know, there used to be a government advisory service which provided help and advice to farmers. That's largely gone, but there are other players within the locality that can support farmers to manage their hedgerows better. And not just farmers, also the people who manage hedgerows for road safety as well. It's not just a farming issue.
Right.
Fantastic. Nick, that's brilliant. Thank you ever so much for your hard work and your colleagues' hard work. We'll move on to Simon Ross now of the Energy and Building section, but just to everyone at the conference, you'll have your opportunity to ask all of the speakers questions in the session a little later. So that'll be hopefully at 10:25 for 15 minutes. So if you want to start thinking about those questions and typing them into the chat function, we'll pick those up later. So Simon, you have 2 minutes to bring to life Energy and Buildings.
Great, thank you, Richard. And thank you also to the group that I've been working with over the 6 months, and for all the hard work. It's been really enjoyable getting to this point, I have to be honest. It's been collaborative and supportive, and really very positive. We've been looking at how our homes in the constituency can get to net zero carbon. We found out that just under a third of all carbon emissions in the constituency are attached to our homes, and there are 42,000 of them in the Ludlow area. Broadly speaking, we need to be looking at reductions in energy consumption from those of around 60%, and then we need to be looking at generating around 40% of the remainder through renewable energy sources. We've also found out that something like 7,000 of those 42,000 householders are struggling in varying ways with a cold home. That's 17% of the electorate, and in some wards that figure rises to nearly 25%, 1 in 4 of all households. The UK average is 13% for that, and by comparison, at the other end of the spectrum, the City of London is 3%. And for many of those people, this will be having a negative impact on their health and well-being. In terms of taking this forward, I think we need to be starting to think strategically and to plan for the long term in relation to this. And by that, I mean over the next 10 to 20 years. We need to be upskilling massively. How we're going to go about doing that, we need to be creating demand, and we need to be building confidence that what we're seeking to do is aspirational and is actually delivering. To give you a sense of the place that we need to get to, we have to be looking at something like 120 to 350 really good quality whole house retrofits every month for the next 1 to 3 decades. The scale of the challenge is really quite significant, and we need to get on with it. If we get this right, our homes will be healthier and warmer and more comfortable to live in, and they will become more positive places for many people to thrive in rather than just survive in. We will lower energy bills, and we will slash carbon emissions in the process. So with all that in mind, and thinking about how we take this forward in the short term, by which I mean the next 1 to 2 years, I would really like to run a field trial with help from 50 to 100 volunteer households. We're going to draw on national best practice to build a local delivery model which we're going to drive, test, break, and put together again. And through that, we have quickly got to get to scale in terms of taking this forward. If you're interested in being part of that, please sign up in chat now and or come along to our breakout session later this morning to discuss it further. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry, fabulous, Simon. Thank you. Over to Jane.
Simon, I think all that you've described costs a lot of money, and we know that the March's local enterprise project, enterprise partnership, has a lot of money. What would be the best thing they could do to support your projects?
Well, there are several hooks. First of all, they have a target which they have set themselves to get to fuel poverty at less than 10% by 2030. They've set a target to get renewable energy generation locally sourced to 50% by 2030. There's work going on in parallel to this conference, which has confirmed that something like 17% of energy demand is currently generated locally, which isn't bad. But actually, if we continue on a business as usual trajectory, then we're going to massively undershoot their own target of 50% by 2030. We are going to be exploring this more in an energy breakout group, and we've got the help of Shropshire and Telford Community Energy and Big Solar Co-op to help us think about that in terms of local schemes. We also know that their main role is around jobs and economic activity, and there is massive potential in the domestic sector. We're looking at investment of something like £30,000 to £40,000 per home to be getting to net zero carbon. Times that by 42,000 homes, and very quickly the numbers are looking at 0.5 to 1 billion. Add in industrial and commercial energy, add in transport, add in renewables. Something very significant is going to happen in the next decade. That'll do.
Okay.
Fantastic. Well, it's time to go to work, Simon, then I think. Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you ever so much for sharing your thoughts and views on that future. I'd like to now introduce again Professor John Whitelegg, who is going to, in 2 minutes, John, did you hear that? 2 minutes, outline your views on transport.
Yeah. Yes, I'm pleased, Richard, that you picked on me by emphasising 2 minutes, and you're picking on me more than anybody else. It shows you have great insight. I'm sitting doing this Zoom conference in rural Sweden, in a place much smaller than Ludlow, much smaller than Bishop's Castle, and much smaller than Craven Arms and many other places. I have 28 buses a day from 5 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night. Every one of them connects with railway stations. All my journeys cost about £2 each. That's a distance equivalent to Hereford to Ludlow, £2 by any combination of bus and train. The interesting thing about transport is that all over the world, including actually in Britain, there are fantastic best practice case studies about how we can decarbonise, how we can reduce carbon emissions from transport. And this is particularly important in Shropshire because our carbon emissions from vehicles in Shropshire, it's difficult to get a figure for the Ludlow constituency, but in Shropshire, that percentage is 37. It's very high, and it's higher than the national average. And the interesting thing about transport is we can do it. It is feasible, it is achievable, but it requires a bit of a mind shift, a bit of a new way of looking at the totality of transport and planning and funding and budgeting. But we can do it, and the transport group working on this Ludlow project has done an amazing amount of work on how we can do this, substantially achieve a net zero target, not totally by any means, but substantially by 2030. And one of the reasons why we're confident is that we've adopted what's a national and an international standard called avoid, shift, improve. I'll talk about this more this afternoon. There isn't time now, but it means that first of all you have to stop. I'm from Lancashire originally, and there's a very strong message in Lancashire: when you're in a big hole, don't buy a bigger shovel. Stop digging. And so avoid means don't add to the problem. So in Shropshire, we need to cancel the North West Relief Road. We need to make sure that all new homes are really, really fit for purpose. Fit for purpose so that they don't generate extra car trips as far as possible. We need to shift. We need to maximise all the chances for getting people to leave a car behind and to shift to walk, cycle, bus, car share. There's numerous options, electric bikes. And everywhere in Britain, not only Britain, but in Europe as a whole, we've got the evidence to show that people will do that. People are willing to change. People are willing to shift. And again, decarbonising is a bit techie. Net zero carbon transport is a bit techie. But what we do know is that when you do it, it improves public health, it increases walking and cycling, it reduces obesity, cardiovascular disease and diabetes, it improves the local economy, it encourages young people to stay in local communities. The benefits are enormous. There's no reason for not doing it. So that's what the transport group is all about. It's not just the techie stuff, it's about how we have a massive upgrade in quality of life in the Ludlow constituency. And the final point, Richard will be very pleased to hear, the final point, the good news, is that actually this is pushing at an open door. Politicians are a bit sceptical about everything I'm saying about the potential to reduce transport carbon, but when people are asked, and there are surveys, even our own Department for Transport has done a survey of attitudes, 74% of all the population in England that is asked about transport says, we want to reduce our use of vehicles. We want to use alternatives to vehicles. Please do whatever you can to make it possible. That will do.
Fabulous, John. Thank you ever so much. A quick question. What do we need from local and national government to make this happen?
It needs a lot more joined up thinking across the totality of local and central government. So, for example, government needs to rejig its budgets. This is very controversial, but I think we've heard about the dramatic impact of climate change in the Solomon Islands. If we want to do some things properly, we have to do it properly, even if it's controversial. So at the moment, we're spending £30 billion on building new roads. We can switch that into best quality Swiss, best quality Swedish, best quality rural public transport. We can have a cycle route to every school and college in Shropshire if we want. So we need to encourage councils like Shropshire Council to start talking about we want to do that and how can we do that and how can we fund it. We want central government to shift budgets to make that possible. And importantly, in transport, we need to trust the people. If this is the will of the people, we need to engage with the willingness of people to make these changes. And if everyone at the moment in Shropshire, in South Shropshire, that does 10 car trips a week, just drops one of them, and that has been proven to be possible everywhere where we've done this work in England, drop 1 out of 10, that's a 10% reduction in carbon. What is the problem? Just do it.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's great to hear, John. So yeah, finally over to Ali Weeks, who's led the Communities and Education chapter of the report. I hope you're unmuted. You are, Ali, this time. Fantastic. Hand over to you to bring your chapter to life.
Okay, so Communities and Education, these are our group findings. Firstly, we feel that climate change is waiting for none of us and time is of the essence. And we have already begun many of the actions that are set out in the report, or we have joined actions that are already going on. It's a bit like joining a moving train and hopefully an accelerating moving train. In order to take action nationally, climate change needs to underpin every decision made by individuals, communities, councils, governments. It needs to be a central and urgent focus. There's a lot of very inspiring work already happening here in Shropshire, as well as in the wider world. So rather than each community or group relearning how best to make a difference, we can all work much better by sharing the wealth of experience already in our midst. Building capacity for how to do this is the task ahead of us all. For example, the climate conversations that we've begun are showing to be a good way of motivating communities. And we offer a toolkit that draws on all of the themes that have been mentioned so far. These often build on local ideas and can be a means to fuel community climate action that is trusted, that is having a trusted person that is known to the community or group, and is also popular, such as litter picks and things like that. You can start with ideas like that. We also focus on carbon usage in schools, and like other public and community buildings, that can be reduced so that they become more energy efficient and sustainable. And although lots of resources exist that can be shared, further development is needed, including newly trained surveyors and installers to affect the whole building or site approach that was mentioned by Simon. Climate mitigation also needs to be embedded into the school curriculum at all levels, and with resources, teaching activities, and involve knowledgeable and trusted local people to talk and work with students, teachers and parents. A forum can be used where teachers meet and share ideas about carbon reduction and climate change, so that young people are equipped for the challenges that are coming. The report can help to share good practice amongst communities in South Shropshire and beyond, and I hope that the three groups, the three breakout groups, will illustrate some of the things that I've been mentioning in this introduction. Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you, Ali. Jane.
What sort of reception has there been when you've been invited into communities to talk? Have you found that there's already things going on, or are people starting from scratch?
No, people aren't starting from scratch. Often there's an idea. It may be that you're referring to the climate conversations, of which we've done quite a few. So often somebody will be invited, and we'll think it's on a certain theme, but then when we get there to the meeting, we find that there's actually another theme or some other things that they're interested in as well. So the idea of these climate conversations is to be very responsive to whatever it is that the group is interested in, and to build on that, so that they're encouraged right from the beginning that what they're actually doing, the climate actions that they're already doing, which is bound to be something, is really encouraged. And then we start to introduce other ideas, and then hopefully come up with a plan, such as the WEM plan, which is in the report on page 150 or something like that in the report. So do have a look at that, which looks at all aspects of community action on climate.
151.
151, that's where it is.
151, lovely. Great, thank you, Ali. That's really good to hear, and a key part, a key cross-cutting theme of how we get this out into communities and into schools. So gives me great pleasure to introduce our MP for the constituency of Ludlow, Philip Dunne, and formerly, I presume Philip is here. Philip, good morning, sir.
Morning. Morning.
We'd like to give you a copy of the report. Jane, are you able to do that?
Yes, we'd like to, Philip, present you with a copy of the South Shropshire Climate Action Report.
Well, thank you very much, Jane. And by the magic of modern science, I'm very pleased to receive what I think is probably a collector's item already, because I think you're mostly distributing this online, but it's a particular pleasure to receive this report in hard copy. And I've got very little to say really, because I think you want to get into the meat of the discussion, but I wanted to thank everybody who's been involved in compiling this, close to 200 pages of very detailed. It provides, to my mind, a summary of all the things that are happening locally to move along the agenda that have been outlined by the chairs of the groups that have been writing it. But it's all backed up by the relevant government or local authority or other policy references, so that it acts a bit like a Bible of options, a menu that people can look at for things that they're interested in and want to explore and take further. Now, it's also, when I had my sort of briefing discussion with the chairs of the groups last week, we were talking about, as it was asked in one of the questions earlier on, what can people do in practice? What are the recommendations that this report makes that individuals or communities or businesses can take forward in order to start delivering on this agenda? And I think that the real value from conference like this and what will follow is how to turn some of these ideas into concrete policy recommendations. Now, it's very easy to
say the government must do this, the government must do that. And I think the point that was made a bit earlier about the need for joined up thinking on the climate change agenda is clearly correct, but it's unbelievably difficult to achieve. And I see this from my position as chairman of the Environmental Audit Committee, where we have the primary role and responsibility in scrutinising government policy and policy objectives and delivery against this agenda. And it is rare that we can get a single, each of our inquiries on whatever the topic happens to be tends to end in a session with a minister. And it is very rare that we have any issue that we look at where there is a single government minister who will accept responsibility. And we've got one coming up shortly where I think we're going to be on green jobs, where we're talking to 4 separate government ministers from 4 different departments. And the challenge in organising government into a manner where this where changes in policy can be delivered effectively is not to be underestimated. It may sound foolish, and it should be easy to organise, and I think the government is taking some sensible steps to start trying to reorganise the way it prioritises policy through setting up a cabinet committee chaired by the Prime Minister. Problem is, it's only met twice, and the government have had their minds somewhat dominated by other events, as we all know, in the last year. And the fundamental question is, can this be pushed up the government agenda to the extent that I think everyone on this call would expect it to be? And because of the complexity of running a society as significant as the UK's, that is quite an ask. Having said that, I think that across the 4 themes that you've broken this report into, there's a lot of very good material in here. I don't agree with all of it, as you would expect, but I do broadly agree with the thrust and the requirement that we need behavioural change in order to drive this agenda forward. And I think the big challenge for a group such as this is, how does one influence behaviours of all of us who live in South Shropshire to try to achieve this? And it needs to be done through a combination of, in my view, of creating policy initiatives and ideas that are both practical and have benefits for people beyond the wider benefit of improving the climate, because getting people to do things they don't want to do is very difficult. Getting to do things that they, if they can be shown it is good for them and good for others, is much easier. So the particular area, and I'm going to stop, and I've probably had my 2 minutes by now, where I'm very encouraged to both see the work that's been done, because it's an area that we've done a lot of in Parliament on land and on heat and buildings, and where there are some practical suggestions about how to take this forward. I think your idea, Simon, of finding 50 demonstration properties to move forward is a really, really good one, and I'd love to try and be part of that as well. But we've got lots of things going on within Shropshire, not necessarily all of it in South Shropshire, which is very positive. We've got lots of businesses that are taking initiatives which will help to advance the cause. We need to work with them, try to use some pilot projects to demonstrate that these can make a positive difference to people's lives, and that's the way, I think, to start spreading the positive messages of what we're trying to do, and I'd love to continue to be part of that. So thank you for inviting me to join you today, Richard and Jane.
Fabulous, Philip. Thank you very much for that. I have a few questions from the audience which we'll take directly from the individuals that have posed them. Could I call on Robert Saunders to unmute and direct a question to Philip, please, Robert?
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Philip, for being here and the good work you're doing with the committee. The question I have, it follows seeing the government minister for climate change, COP26, speaking in front of a Scottish wind farm, telling us we have to make significant changes. but in England, wind power is effectively prohibited. Would you be encouraging the government to reconsider that policy on wind power?
I think the mood on wind power is changing because we've seen the extraordinary effect of offshore wind power in bringing down the cost of renewable energy. We've on our committee we did a short hearing into offshore wind to see what the potential was around the UK, and with the new what they call floating platforms, which is using deep sea water to oil and gas technology to enable you to tether a turbine in deep water, the potential to increase wind offshore is almost, well, the industry say,
I think investment in broadband might be a good thing to be doing. Philip, we've lost you. I don't know if we're going to get Philip back. We had lots of really good questions.
Richard, if you do get him back, can you ask him to drop the video so he's just got the live feed on the mic instead?
Yeah. Good point. Thank you.
How annoying. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll have a record of all the questions. So thank you to everybody who put fabulous questions in for Philip. I'm sure we can follow up and send those to him and hopefully get a response. And so I think, sorry, Jane?
No, he's in Scotland, if that makes any difference. Probably windier up there. No, well, he seems to have dropped off completely.
Okay, and we are a little bit behind schedule anyway, so I think we'll move on. And
just back with you, Richard. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, are you? Okay, great, Philip. So yeah, we lost you halfway through that question. So yeah, maybe you could finish your response to Robert's question. We'll have one more question, and then unfortunately we'll have to move on given the time.
Sure, I understand. Well, I'm not sure at what point I dropped off, but I was basically saying I think that attitudes are beginning to shift, and I think there is the prospect of more onshore in due course. But given the capacity to increase offshore, I suspect that is politically more acceptable, and it's technically probably quicker to get the consents and the construction and the capacity going than it will be through our planning process for onshore.
Okay. Thank you. And one final question, Mark Fermor, if you're able to unmute, Mark, and pose your question, please.
Yes, thank you, Philip, and thank you very much for your support. I'm interested to sort of hear what your own views are in terms of what you think the most important policy change is that you'd like to see from the UK government.
This doesn't bode well, or he's keeping very still. I think we are going to move on. Sorry, Mark, for we will move on. Dr. Ken Addison, Emeritus Fellow in Earth and Climate Systems Change, St Peter's College, Oxford University, and a fine resident of the constituency of Ludlow, I believe.
Indeed, yes.
I would like to ask Jane to hand you a copy of the report, please.
Ken, we'd like to present you with a copy of the report. And thank you for writing our foreword.
It's just come through the door now.
Ah, brilliant.
Over to you, Ken.
Yeah. Global climate change is now accepted almost universally, triggered initially by greenhouse gas warming, but well beyond that, with its further impacts on Earth's other land, sea, and biological systems. Most participants here know and understand the principal mechanisms and climate predictions towards 2100 and are aware of the very real risks of crossing the threshold to dangerous and in many respects irreversible climate change in the next 15 years. My message today is of further risks not generally in the public domain. and like COVID are already ahead of us and with capacity to outrun us if we're not careful. This must galvanise collective action to mitigate what we can alter and adapt to what we can't. South Shropshire Climate Action's exemplary guidance, which I think is extremely well written and very professional. Chief among concerns is the Earth's cryosphere, the snow, ice and permafrost of polar regions where temperatures are forecast to rise by between 6 and 8 degrees Celsius by 2100. They are what we call metastable systems. They are at or near critical tipping points. And whilst rising sea level, fueled by ice melt, does not threaten Shropshire directly, shrinking Arctic ice and melting permafrost do. Seemingly very far away, sunlight reflecting ice is replaced by sunlight absorbing ocean. Melting permafrost exposes frozen peat to decomposition, releasing methane, which individually is 50 times more potent as a greenhouse gas. Both amplify atmospheric warming. And if this were not enough, ocean warming risks destabilizing methane-rich Arctic marine sediments, threatening potential runaway warming, and aided by what I think is the obscene scramble for vast newly exposed Arctic basin hydrocarbon reserves by the Arctic nations. Disappearing splendor of alpine, Andean and Alaskan glaciers and progressive collapse of Antarctic ice shelves complete the cryosphere's accelerating decline, faster than we were anticipating. Conversely, accelerating Greenland ice sheet melt threatens the Atlantic thermohaline circulation, which keeps us 15 to 20 degrees Celsius warmer than our equivalent latitude in, for example, Labrador. Global warming potentially leading to Western European cooling simply extends the uncertainty. I mean, you need to remember that net zero carbon does not reduce long-lasting carbon dioxide impacts in the atmosphere. So how on earth can 100,000 South Salopians in 600 square miles possibly make a difference? Albert Einstein recognized the world as a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. Well, you formed the South Shropshire Climate Action Group and now have a very well-researched, impressively detailed and professionally published next steps. Clear targets over 4 main themes. This is the end of the beginning. The task now is to persuade all of our fellow citizens, businesses and councillors that community action is important, catalyst to others, and to hold government's feet to the fire to meet their obligations and international targets. Inaction is not an option, and in helping others, we help us all. So say to all your Shropshire neighbours, if not now, when? And if not us, who?
Fabulous, Ken. Thank you ever so much for both the writing of the foreword and also your thoughts now. There'll be an opportunity to put questions to Ken in a little while. Gives me great pleasure if Councillor Ian Nellins is with us to present the report to you, the newly elected portfolio holder for climate change, and I believe, yeah, Councillor for Market Drayton or East, I think. Yeah, Ian, are you able to receive the report? I think Jane would like, I'm not sure you have the report at your end, so this might not work.
I don't think the broadband's good enough between North and South Shropshire, but have a go.
No,
just so you see the scale of it, and we'll be obviously getting one to you, and you've probably seen it online, but there's a lot of reading and a lot of work gone into it, so we very glad to present it to you, and we'd love to hear what your next steps are going to be. Your first steps.
Sorry, I look forward to getting that. As you say, first steps. The first step is for probably you to understand me, as the North Shropshire accent is probably a little bit stronger. Probably tell I'm not originally from here. Yeah, up until Wednesday, I had no idea I was going to be doing this just as a newly elected councillor. but a great honour and a great challenge, I think, for the future. I'm from a military background. I spent 39 years in the regular army and still do some Army Reserve stuff. You might be surprised to know, but the Ministry of Defence does place a great emphasis on environmental issues, and we have been part of that throughout the world. So although I've never been a green activist as such or anything, I have always tried to practice as much as possible. But listening to some of the presenters, Gladys, for example, it's heartbreaking to see how our activities have affected her part of the world. Listening to John on transport and living in Market Drayton, which has become a commuter town with no commuter facilities other than roads which are blocked every day trying to get from here to Shrewsbury or Stoke. So there's a lot of stuff that has sort of just rang bells in my head, which will take a bit of getting into. But as I said, I'm new. I've had my first briefing on waste on yesterday. I'm going to spend a lot of time over the next few days getting to grips with some of the things within the portfolio. Thank you very much for, I'm glad I came on this. I got your email to see this because it's all about getting that initial understanding. I can't promise the world. Probably my ignorance on it at the minute is probably a good thing, so I get a clear understanding. But it's encouraging to see how many people are on this call. The backgrounds from a lot of people and the stuff they've done in the past and steering towards what we're trying to get to is really heartening. So thank you. I have to leave the call, unfortunately, at 12 o'clock for family reasons, Dad's taxis. But no, thank you very much. And I look forward to engaging with you and seeing your report. Please do keep in touch and keep holding me to account, because that's the way we hopefully get things done. And again, inspired by what John said earlier, not about being elected as a wimpy councillor, hopefully, but about his comments about, we must, failure isn't an option, and we should strive for everything. So thank you very much, and good luck with everything that you're doing so far.
Fabulous, Ian. So thank you ever so much for doing this at short notice. And I note the Smiths album cover in the background, and ask Shropshire Council how soon is now. There we go. There's a reference to those of us that were around in 1984. Fantastic. So gives me great pleasure to the final bit of this section in terms of handing the report over to Rachel Foster, who joins us, I think, from Cardiff this morning, local Shropshire human and representing young people today. Rachel, the floor is yours.
Here's your copy.
Thank you, Jane. It's great to be holding this. I feel so proud of everything that this group has done, and it's just given me so much hope. Before I met this group, the South Shropshire Climate Action Group, I had no idea that there were so many people fighting the same thing as I am, and that care and are trying to bring about change. And to see this plan physically in my hands gives me so much hope for what the future may hold, and so I'm really grateful to be a part of it.
Fabulous, Rachel. Thank you for those thoughts. And given that not everyone on the call today is necessarily what I'd call young, what advice would you give to those that aren't?
I guess firstly, I just say be open to change. I think we're all capable of change, and also I'd like to point out that as much as we, there's talk of making change for future generations and for our children and our grandchildren, I think, as Gladys has pointed out, it's very much happening now. We require action now, and there's no emphasis on I think regardless of your age, regardless of your background, and no matter what understanding or awareness you have of this, we're all in this together, and I think we can do this, and as this plan shows, we've got the tools and the resources to make those changes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rachel. Really appreciate you being here and for sharing those thoughts. We now go into a session called All Comers Questions. We obviously have lost a little bit of time throughout the morning, so we're a little bit behind schedule. I suggest we maybe take about half the time we had for questions, like obviously to focus on any questions anyone has for Gladys, I know I have a few questions already. I think Dave Green has a question for Simon. And while we're listening to this, if anyone has any other questions for any of the people you've heard from this morning, apart from Philip, who's had to go, it'd be fabulous to see that in the chat box now. So Dave, are you able to unmute and ask Simon your question?
Yeah, I wonder whether Simon sees a role for heat networks in decarbonising, as heat is a major element of our carbon emissions, and electricity is also being dealt with, but heat is the important thing. What role of heat networks?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Dave. I suspect, if I'm honest, you probably know a lot more about this than I do. I think we have to be looking at a fabric first approach. I mean, that's got to be central to what we do. We've got to try and reduce heat demand as much as we possibly can. Our report, based upon work from the Centre for Alternative Technology, is suggesting heat demand reduction of around 60%. But I think that heat networks have to be a part of this in some way. I have to be honest, it really doesn't feature much in our day-to-day conversations. But I would welcome exploring that with you, and I know you and Chris and others have done some really interesting work recently looking at heat network development in a shared ground loop way with a number of sites in South Shropshire. So in time I'd very much look forward to developing that with you as well.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Simon. I'm not seeing too many questions. Most of the questions were for Philip. I just wonder any of the chat reporters, or whether Jane, you've seen any questions in the chat.
No, I think perhaps we could pick up one from Gail Waters, because she talks about the she'd perhaps like to ask her own question, but she brings up the topic of environmental costs of transporting goods, which obviously often includes food. So maybe if Nick could come in there on diet and the links to agriculture, that might be a fruitful little area to explore now.
Yeah, Gail, are you okay to unmute and ask your question?
My concern's really been recently that all these trade deals that are talked about, which involve transporting goods from often quite far-flung places, and the latest one is Australia, no mention is made of the environmental cost of that. And I just wonder why.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that question, because obviously I'm not involved in negotiating the trade deals. But you would hope that the sense of the climate and ecological emergency that we face would mean that questions like this were cross-cutting across the whole of government policy, including international discussions. On the food side, I mean, there are some signs of hope in terms of local procurement, in that government is setting out standards of procurement which do take into account the impact on the environment and the carbon footprint. But that hasn't, as you say, it hasn't really extended towards international trade. But again, I think that's where we as individuals can set a trend, because that trade only exists because of the food we choose to buy. And if we were serious about sourcing locally, and looking at the carbon footprint of the food that we buy, that would impact upon that trade. But no, I can't answer your question. I'm not involved in those discussions, but it ought to be part of an international agreement that we look at the carbon footprint.
Great, thank you. And
a question here from Robert for Ian Nellins, which should be interesting.
Ian, you may not be able sensibly to answer the question, which I would understand, but certainly food for thought. It would be very helpful, I think, if council decision making, planning applications being one of them, included a rough estimate or evaluation of the carbon emissions consequences, so that would actually inform councillors in advance of a decision. Does this add to our emissions significantly or insignificantly, seriously, or whatever?
Thanks for that, Robert. Obviously, I've only been to one county council meeting, but last month in Market Drayton Town Council, we had a planning application submitted for 206 new homes on what is known as the Greenfields. That's a sports club site. And I strongly objected to that for a number of reasons. One being the fact that a small town like Market Drayton hasn't got the infrastructure in many ways to support that. As I mentioned earlier, people, in fact, a term I've used before, the population of Market Drayton is 13,500 people, but most of them don't live here, if that makes sense. They commute from here, which, you know, to be honest, that wasn't on the forefront of my mind about the carbon thing at the time, but the whole problem does make sense here, that without the implication, think of the wider implications of a decision. You know, what are we bringing onto ourselves? So it's not just the carbon, but it's the education, the medical side, and all that goes with it. And I think it was a similar thing in Tong recently, where all council were trying to build houses in Tong. But a wise councillor actually said, well, you know, again, where's the infrastructure, the railway link or anything to take those people back out who are going to be working in probably Wolverhampton or Birmingham or such like. So I think it's a good point, and it has got a lot of implications, but I couldn't really answer your question at the minute, but I will make sure I'm aware of it.
Great. Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Ian. I think Alan, I don't know if Gladys is still with us, but Gladys, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Fantastic.
Sorry.
Yeah, Alan, are you able to ask your question about the impact on food on the Solomon Islands to Gladys?
Yes, Gladys, thank you for appearing here today. My concern for you over there is how do you manage for food when you have these tidal surges? Because you must have land that's put to use. How does this impact on your actual sustainability of your own food security?
Thank you, Alan, for your question. That's a really important one. Honestly, different communities within the Solomons do things differently in terms of managing their farmlands. For a lot of our people, as I said before, relocation is very difficult because of the traditional land ownership rights that we have here. So a lot of rural communities are customary land. Have customary land ownership, which is passed on like by generations. And people can't just really go and farm on someone else's land or relocate to someone else's land, because then that causes social crisis. But what some people try to do now is move further mainland to areas that they are probably more closely related to, or tribes that they're closely related to, and then they do farming there. Otherwise, in communities such as the Lilisiana village that I showed the photos of earlier, they mostly rely on buying food from the shops now. So they're not doing farming anymore, which is really difficult for them. And like the islands in Lord Howe, who plant, they mostly do like taro. I'm not sure if you have taro growing in the UK, but they grow it in the swamps, and now the swamps they've got saltwater intrusion, so it's no longer healthy for the taro to grow. So then that's just it's just cutting down in yield, and there's no other option because it's just such a tiny island. It's far out, like very remote. So there's not really anywhere to relocate to unless the government decides to allocate an area, which is not yet happening.
Yeah, that was my concern for you, that adaptation isn't an option with this type of event taking place. That was the main thing that I wanted to get across to people. It's very easy to sort of say, oh yeah, we can cut this back, but it's the adaptation to that change. Thank you very much, Gladys. I do appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Gladys. Yeah, I'm going to take the decision of the chair to cut short the questions now. There's been loads of fabulous questions coming in, and I think the group will take on board the questions that were asked and seek to resolve those and answer them perhaps on the website. But just given the timing, we've lost quite a lot of time in this first session, and still got a way to go. So now what I'd like to do is just to highlight the breakout room. So Esme, I don't know if you could share the options for the breakout sessions later. So we have 10 fabulous breakout sessions for you to join one of after the break at 11:10. There's Land and Food hosted by Mark and Joy. We have Transport by John and Les, Carbon Watchers, Land and Biodiversity. Number 5 is Retrofit, the retrofitting of buildings, especially homes. So do you want a community energy scheme?
Number, please.
Then we have number 7, Citizen Zero, engaging with communities. Number 8, bringing climate action into schools. Number 9, parish and town councils sharing and moving forward. And then finally, low carbon entrepreneurs and startup businesses. And essentially what I'd like you to do both now and also at the start of the break, you'll get an opportunity to do this as well, is to go to your image on Zoom, and in the top right hand corner of your image, when you move the mouse there, you will see 3 dots. And if you click on those dots, you'll be presented with a little drop down menu that will, one of those options will be to rename. And what we'd like you to do is to put the number of the breakout room that you'd like to join in front of your name. So I would become 10 space Richard Davies. And then that will allow you to be allocated to the right breakout room. Esme will be able to put all the 10s or the 3s or the 7s into the right breakout room. So find your image, go to the top right hand corner, like move your mouse over the 3 dots, click that, rename, and then put the number that you want to join in front of your name.
Richard,
so that's what, oh
Richard,
yes, Jane.
Your words broke up when you got from 3, 4, and 5. So just to draw people's attention to number 4, I think disappeared.
Okay. Yeah, Land and Biodiversity. So looking at nature, water, nature recovery networks and peatlands, hosted by Mike Kelly. So hopefully you can all see what you might be presented with and what you'll be able to contribute to in those breakout rooms. We'll just come back to that a little bit at the end of this first session of the morning. Great. So we'll move on now to session 10. To key projects and to welcome back Alan Wilson, who'd like to, has got 3 minutes to talk a little bit about business. So Alan, I'd like to hand over to you, sir.
Can we just say goodbye to Gladys, because she's just left a message to say she's going.
Right, big thank you, Gladys.
Thank you, Gladys. Yeah, lovely, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
All the
you.
best.
Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Great. Alan.
Yes, good morning. Sorry about that. Technical issue for some reason, I don't know why. Good morning, everyone. I want to talk about the Shropshire Climate Action Partnership's Enterprise Engagement Work Group. Just a small group within the scheme of things within SCAP, where we're tackling the environment of business and how to get them on board on their journey to zero carbon. Now, it might be interesting for you to know that there's over 18,000 businesses in Shropshire, and of those, they employ 121,000 people. However, most of them are what's known as micro businesses. In other words, 0 to 9 people are the most people that those businesses actually employ. Now, there are other businesses, 250 plus businesses of employees, and each one of those is mandated through the Environment Agency to make what's known as an ESOS report, which is an energy saving opportunity scheme. And in December 2015 and in December 2019, they all made reports as to what those energy savings were. So that's the only statutory requirement for businesses to look at energy. So what's the rest of the businesses doing? Well, it's a hodgepodge of bits and pieces as to what they want to do. There was a call for evidence last month from government asking what larger businesses would consider be the regime that they were prepared to report on. That is yet to go through the mill, and then they will come up with a reporting system. So what we thought within SCAP, certainly within the enterprise engagement team, was to sort of look at local businesses and ask them how they are getting on with their journey towards zero carbon, and those that haven't even started. So we've been fielding around and engaging with these businesses through the Shropshire Chamber of Commerce and through local contacts. And luckily, we've had contact from CAT, who have got some students available in June doing an MSc in relation to change management. And what we're doing is engaging these local businesses with the opportunity to participate in this project. That way they come on a 2.5-hour virtual project interview on Tuesday the 15th. And the same again, where those questions have been asked, they get feedback from the students in direction towards their carbon reduction measures and change management possibility programs. That will take place on Thursday for another 2.5 hours. So 2 sessions, same week. And so far we've got 8 companies that are definitely involved, and we're going to have some more that are talking about joining. But I think following this, we'll have a few more that are actually going to engage. The idea is to actually get this together and then put together a consultation paper and share the results so that people can then learn from the experiences, those who have started on this journey, what obstacles they met, what possible things that they can give to you that would help you over those barriers, and equally other ways of looking at how to take that journey forward within businesses. Because the biggest problem is kicking off on these things. It's easy to talk about it, but how do you get it off the ground and up and running? There will be people like us, we're champions, that will be within the business who are up and very keen for it, but it needs management buy-in, and it also needs support and the teamwork to build around it as well. So there's a load of things that are going to be required. It's all these learning outcomes that we hope to establish through this project with CAT, that we can then promulgate that out to those businesses in Shropshire and hopefully build further forward. I did say I'd only take 3 minutes today. Sorry for being a fraction late in appearing, but I'm going to leave it at that and let Mark pick up the baton from this point. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alan. And I'm just going to say a few words, particularly about links with partners. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to all involved. This really inspiring report and amazingly inspiring conference this morning. So with SCAP, you know, I mean, I think for all of us really, our starting point is in an emergency is essential. We all work together to a common plan. Rather than being a campaign group, in SCAP we're seeking to represent and work with all stakeholders across the county and sort of really welcome good ideas from all quarters. Our membership already includes dozens of enterprises, community groups, environmental organisations, entrepreneurs, small farmers and large estates, local authorities, technology firms, architects, planners, and we really need to further reach out and grow that network, which is tremendous already. We're also making links with other organisations beyond the county, and really as an umbrella for all Shropshire groups, we want to magnify what each group can achieve on its own. But we're also driven to be an action organisation that can be a catalyst for change. So to provide a few brief examples, firstly, we took our inspiration from Zero Carbon Britain from the Centre for Alternative Technology, and the tremendous work they've done there. And they've also given us really excellent support and further ongoing collaboration, as Alan has already mentioned. We've also developed a really strong relationship with the Centre for Sustainable Energy. Again, a brilliant centre for expertise, and they've given us tremendous support for our plans. Both of those organisations are also introducing us to a wider network of other county partnerships, and we're pooling ideas and hopefully influence and to find a collective voice, I hope, as we lead up to Glasgow in November. We're working with the energy sector to show what Shropshire's energy resources are and how we can meet the net zero Shropshire 2030 energy demand. We've engaged with the grid operators, for example, supporting them now with energy mapping results so that they can make their business case to government for the money it takes to build the net zero grid that we need, which is a huge part of what we need by 2030. In the building sector, we've got a working group looking at how low carbon heat networks will help us. We've got input from Shropshire Council, the Town Council, Business Improvement District, energy building practitioners, community groups. In transport, we're working with a consortium including Shropshire Council and a number of businesses in the transport sector, investigate how to get electric charge points and car club vehicles, encourage a radical shift away from private car ownership that we need, really to halve or more than halve the number of cars in our county by 2030. We're essentially inviting all Shropshire businesses and communities, environmental groups to join our partnership by pledging support for zero carbon Shropshire by 2030. And you know, this is for a lot of us, this is our employer as well. So please encourage your employer if they're not already signed up. And thank you very much.
Brilliant, Mark. Thanks for giving us some insights into those connections and links with other organisations. Lorraine, I think, Lorraine Waumsley, the carbon of consumption. Are you able to share a few minutes on that for us? Thank you.
Yes, please. Esme, you've got my presentation, I think. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. I'm from the Consumption and Resources Group in SCAP, and we've been looking at all of the impacts of our consumption choices on carbon. It's very overwhelming, the whole project of climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, and sometimes you just think, what on earth can I as one person could do? And I'm hoping in the next few minutes I will explain what you can do, at least in Shropshire, South Shropshire. Next slide, please, Esme. At the moment, what's mostly happening is all of our goods are produced what's known as in a scheme known as the linear economy. Do we think about the carbon within all the stuff that we buy? And that's not just the physical object, but how it got to us in the first place. The raw materials, manufacture, and all of the carbon that's emitted during that whole process, the packaging, consumption, and then at the end of the day, we throw it away. A lot of the work over the last few years has been towards driving prices down. We outsource our production work to other countries where the wages are low, and at the end of the day, it's often cheaper to buy a new product than to repair the old. So that's led to, next slide please, the throwaway society, consumerism, fast fashion, things like that. This graphic here from an excellent website, Everyday Plastic, shows how much plastic in the UK is thrown away every year, and it doesn't stay in the UK. As you've seen, the plastic bottles that were washed up on the shores in the Solomon Islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it's extraordinary. David Attenborough's shown us lots of information about that too. Most of that is just packaging. Next slide please. So what can we do? The Ellen MacArthur Foundation has been working with businesses for a while now to try and reset the mindset of business, starting with design. So instead of designing a product in order for it to become cheaper or smaller or whatever, more attractive so people will buy more, the design feature will be on whether it can be reused, whether it can be repaired. So the whole set of that design has got that in mind, end of life in mind. So as it goes through the system, it can be repaired easily, it can be recycled, and all of the end products can be fed back into the cycle again, cutting down on the amount of raw materials that have to be dug out of the ground. So that's one way in which we can circle things around. Next slide, please. We're turning the waste hierarchy on the head by doing this. We start off, number one, rethink, ask yourself, do I really need to buy this object? Do I really need to buy as much of this object? Right down to dispose as being the very last resort. That's what we do then. Next slide, please. So what can we do as an individual? Well, within the SCAP project, we're trying to set up Carbon Watchers project. And if you want to know more about that, that's in Breakout Group 3. But more importantly, measure your own carbon footprint. By doing that, you will see very clearly where you yourself can make changes. Pledge to reduce it as much as you can. Look at the consumption and resources section of the SCAP website. I've put a link there, so when this goes up onto the website, you can click to it straight from that. We've put together loads of information, ideas, links to other useful sites. Lots of ideas out there. People are doing enormous amount. I leave the last word to, next slide, please. Vivian Westwood. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Lorraine. Thank you ever so much. Really interesting. And now the final bit of this first half of the morning session is to Generation Zero. So I'd like to welcome Jessica Walton, Elle Thurston and Drew Wright to the floor to tell us a little bit about Generation Zero. Over to you guys.
Cool. Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Drew and I'm representing the Generation Zero Carbon Shropshire. So we're really similar to the main SCAP group, except we bring the perspective of young people. And we think it's the most important perspective because we're the ones who are actually going to be living through the climate crisis and are going to really, really feel the effects as we start to grow older. The thing I want to talk about isn't necessarily a popular opinion, and there was quite a discussion on whether I should be talking about it or not. And for me, it's the education that we're giving. So since leaving school, my perspective is that I've left school and then only then have I learnt about all the horrors that are going on in the world. And I think one of the reasons we can't talk about it to younger children in schools is because the reality of it is so horrible. It's so graphic and it's just unbelievable. But then my thinking now is to not say this to children at a young age and to not show them how animals are slaughtered and how the rainforest is being destroyed is really propaganda the other way. And it's shielding them from what they can't possibly be shielded from. So I think what that creates then is this group of young people who, and we feel quite angry and quite passionate. And that's why there is stuff like the, kind of the Extinction Rebellion, that's it. That's why Extinction Rebellion exists. Because there's this group of young people who are really angry, really passionate, and we feel that no one is really listening to us. So that's what we want to do in Generation Zero Carbon, is bring all these people together and build something that's really productive, really focused and peaceful, and goes through all the right channels politically to then bring about this key change. And I think the other one is we look at people who are leading the country, and that is fundamentally the generation who's got us to this state and the generation who continues to not do anything about it. So what I would say as well is, listening to Philip this morning, and it's a really tough problem to solve, and I think it absolutely needs those guys to be passionate as we are and to listen to the younger generation and to push forward. And I think if they think it's too hard, then I don't think they're the right people for the job. Cheers. Yeah.
Great, thank you ever so much.
Yes, yeah. So I think kind of following on from what Drew said, we want to kind of inspire the next generation of decision makers how to live through this environmental crisis. So like Drew touched on, there are people, you know, now like you guys who are creating these plans, which is so important, but we need to get young people involved. Because we're the next generation, we're going to be making these decisions and taking them forward. And we want to make sure that young people have a space that they can be heard. And make them feel that their points of view are being listened to. So personally, I was a politics and international relations student. So I studied the very specifics of the economic, the legal, the social and political impacts of climate change, stretching all over the world. So I know firsthand what can happen if we do something about it. If we create a green economy, create sustainable jobs for young people, it can be a really, really hopeful future for us. We believe that this young people's impact is absolutely vital in creating this long-lasting change. And as Drew said, we believe that through our partnership with SCAP, through this report, we can really bring Shropshire's emissions down and meet that 2030 target.
Thanks, Jess.
Fabulous, Jess. Thank you, and thanks, Drew, as well. That's really inspiring to hear, and hopefully we'll continue to all work together to make this happen. Great, so that
last little bit, really quick.
Sorry?
Yeah, sorry, there's Elle here as well.
Oh, is that, sorry, I hadn't seen Elle. Sorry, Elle.
Right, no worries.
Oh, you're there, hooray.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. No, so I'd just like to speak a little bit about where we're at the moment and where we're hoping to go in the future of this group. So hi, I'm Elle. I'm a first year sustainability and environmental management student at Leeds. And as Jess and Drew were saying, I think a lot of us are here because we are just terrified of what's happening in the world. And I think a lot of young people are in the same situation where we just don't really know what we can do. I think the systemic stuff feels too big and the individual action feels too small. And a lot of young people just don't really feel, where do I fit into this? Where can I actually have an impact? And that's hopefully where we come in. And I think being a Shropshire-based organisation, same way as the South Shropshire Climate Plan, has so much power in that it is local, it is direct, and it is coming from within our communities. So being able to speak from that and connect to people who are literally our neighbours in our community, at our school, we can actually give them people a voice and let them feel that they are heard and they can have an impact in this. So we've only been running for 15 weeks, but in that time we have got our website up. I'll put it in the chat in a minute. We've got our social media. We've spoken on Shropshire Start and BBC Shropshire Radio. We've got some competitions running, and we're just trying really hard to get our message out and to get our message heard. And we're also at the moment still kind of like in our formation stage, trying to find out where we're going to have our biggest impact. But we've got projects rolling in, and we're really excited to start actually making change and working with different organisations and lobbying for change. Yeah, that's where we're at the moment. So our main message that we want to get out is that the future is bright as long as young people come together, both within ourselves and across generations, to make sure that the world has a future. So yeah, thank you.
There's an interesting question for you all there. Christina says the XR in South Shropshire average age is 60 something, and we would love more young people to be involved. Can you help us? Christina might like to add to that. Christina?
No, that's it really. You know, how do we get young people involved? We've had some really lovely college students, but they move on to uni, and we just, how do we connect?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's pretty much what we're trying to do at the moment, is figure out the best ways to make that network and reach young people, whether it's working with schools, youth groups, going through social media or other formats to try and reach young people. And then hopefully when we have that network, we then have the ability, like, to connect to other, you know, XR, whatever we choose to associate with, and yeah, get young people on board. So hopefully we'll figure that out and get back to you.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Thanks, Christina, for your question. And I'd just like to point out, you say you've only had 15 weeks. Well, you've only got another 28, so 15 weeks before it's 2030. So let's not hang about. Yeah, just one final session from the end. I'd just like to, I hope you enjoyed the discussions. I hope you found your way to the form that I posted in the chat and were able to possibly put some of your ideas and discussions into there. I just would like to call, I don't really know how to do this, but anybody like to unmute themselves and give a flavour of the discussion to everyone so we can enjoy more than one breakout room. I won't pick on anyone, I'll just wait for some brave person to volunteer. I think I'll drum my fingers on my laptop and to encourage you.
If you yeah, I'll tell you what happened in our breakout group if you like.
Fantastic. Who's talking?
Sorry, it's Noel Lambert.
Oh, hi,
Solar
Noel.
Co-op Share Energy. Yeah.
Great.
So we got through the first two questions. Principles that you live by. In summary, we've got quite a few vegetarians, so people looking at their diet, definitely their transport, preferring not to fly, using an electric vehicle or no vehicle at all, walking into town, going into the market, buying loose vegetables and so on, so reducing packaging. Jess in particular was interested in systemic change, so individual actions are important, but we need to be focusing on systemic change as well, so the higher level. And then we looked at what do we need to facilitate things within the report getting going. There were some interesting points about reducing barriers to engagement and really getting people to be able to come and take actions, so at scale. Robin Pope put in something that really interested me personally, which was about planning applications. We should be able to have a standardized request to put climate considerations in first when we're challenging planning applications for multiple housing developments, that kind of thing. Yeah, and generally Generation Z are great. Let's get them in front of the council, and everybody's ears seem to pick up when young people are speaking, and they're the voters of the future. So let's get them in front of influencers and change decision makers.
Fantastic.
Next person.
Thank you, Noel. Anyone else? Maybe we'll take another couple.
I'll say something from our group, Richard. We also only got round to 2 questions, and about what we would do on a personal level or have the principles we've lived by. That was really interesting because some of us were just kind of like the things that we do in our everyday lives that have mattered for us, whereas some others in the group had been working even on a global level to be able to impact things that have had a global influence. So that was quite a contrast. The other thing that we talked about, we also mentioned planning, but how do we get the powers that be really listening, particularly the MPs other than Philip Dunne in Shropshire, and the importance, really, the serendipity, if you like, of having Philip Dunne as our South Shropshire Ludlow constituency MP, who is doing so much, and us producing this report. That's a really powerful combination, and something we really should take forward, because those 2 things coming together is very powerful.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helen.
I could say a few words for our group.
That would be fantastic.
Suzanne. So,
thank you, Suzanne.
Like everybody, everyone's been doing small things in their own way that they could. And one idea to spark a conversation or to make people think is to carry through the suggestion that people had before of doing your own measuring your own carbon footprint. And there is an app, a Giki, G-I-K-I, that can help you do that and make you think about things that you haven't considered. Maybe you haven't considered where your pension is invested. And that can then spark a discussion with others around you. And being part of the local fabric of groups, so helping to manage a local car club, and then sharing and networking. So example, a repair cafe in Ludlow is made a toolkit to a repair cafe in Church Stretton can follow to set up. And then, so keeping those networks and then feeding into the SCAP, the Shropshire Climate Action Partnership, and maybe coordinating key messages to the community through SCAP to try and get more information into the local media, but key messages that people who are outside of our bubbles can really relate to and maybe become involved. And it's about preaching beyond the converted.
Fantastic, Helen. So yeah, just wondering if there's just one more group out there who'd like to give us a flavour of their conversation.
Yeah, can I jump in?
Of course you can.
It's
Yeah,
Janet.
who's talking? Janet. Oh, hi, Janet.
Janet, yeah, hi. Yeah, I mean, a lot of points have already been made, and people are doing things, and it's always that tricky question of when do you take that leap into doing something expensive like electric cars or solar panels or whatever it is. Looking at what we need to do in the future, it's suggested that we need to keep people's feet to the fire, as I think Steve put it, that of our elected representatives. And what would be really useful is to have a somewhere physical for people to go for help and advice, whether that's an online thing or whether it's a physical building where people can find out what they can do and all the suggestions that have been made. So they're really the main points.
Fantastic. Thank you, Janet. And I hope you were able to find your way to the chat and to put some of that online. Alan, you've got your hand up, sir. Would you like to, have you got a question?
A very quick one. Bottom line is that came out of our session was everyone to read your report that you've put out and then start to look at bits and pieces that people can put together. The other one that came out was influencing from family and friends. In other words, just talk about the topic and get people engaged in it. The more people that are talking about this, and the one that did come out is influencing those influencers that are in multimedia. Why bother to generate something yourself when you could influence somebody who has got a massive following already? That came out as well. And small changes make a difference. I think I'll stop at that. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alan. So it's time to move into the final session to essentially to hear a bit more of the voice of the conference. I think at my opening words, I outlined the fact that there were 8 years, 7 months and 9 days to the 1st of January 2030. That's the target for South Shropshire to get to net zero. For the UK as a whole, the current government policy is the 1st of January 2050, which is actually 28 years, 7 months and 9 days. So South Shropshire only have 30% of the time of the UK to get to net zero, which I think is both, well, it's a conundrum. It's a great opportunity, but also a great challenge, which leads me into this final bit, really. It's about the what do we do on Monday? Having all of this fabulous work and the energy of this morning, all the lovely ideas, and hearing from Gladys and some of those issues and all the practical stuff and the different groups you've been in. It's what do we do next? And I think in my introductory conversation, I outlined 3 ideas that the groups wants to put to you. And this initial idea of we rely on our enlightened self-interest. We have heard just in the feedback from the random breakout groups, the random discussion groups, maybe the way you change the way you travel, or the change what you eat, or you think about popping your head in the attic and seeing how much loft insulation is in there, or whatever those things might be, planting some trees. All of these things probably won't be on their own enough, but if enough people are enlightened and enough people are having that struggle, maybe that's enough. I'm not absolutely sure. I'd be interested to hear your views. The second thing I outlined was sustained lobbying to bring about change, perhaps to give our politicians what's called the political space to be more ambitious, to bring forward policy in action. We talked about potentially, non-violent direct action through Extinction Rebellion. Obviously, we heard from Generation Z and the work that they're doing. and Rachel and other young people and not so young people, perhaps, yeah, there's lots that can be done there. We've heard about CPRE in the discussion group that I've just witnessed, lots out there, and also from the education and communities group, we've heard about carbon conversations, and all of those things are a bit akin to you know, generating interest and trying to change people's minds. The third idea was this idea of South Shropshire, or the constituency of Ludlow, becoming what the group is calling a net zero futures pilot. So this is drawing a line around the constituency of Ludlow, maybe a bit like a Freeport. You've probably heard in the news post-Brexit, these are a network of things all across the world that actually demark themselves with different sets of regulations. There's different treatment of taxation and national insurance and rules and regulations about development. Could we kind of make South Shropshire a green port, maybe the modern low carbon equivalent of a garden city, or you've probably heard of enterprise zones, where again you draw a line around an industrial estate and allow things to be done differently there. Or maybe you've heard of Port Sunlight, a pioneering place that tried to change the way that it looked after the workers and the communities that live there. So I'm obviously, as I'm spending a bit more time on number 3, I'd be really interested in making the future happen early, bringing early adopter benefits to South Shropshire in terms of generating jobs and generating warmer homes and a different transport system, but also doing the learning so that the UK as a whole doesn't have to make the mistakes that it's made with the Green Deal or the green homes thing. I mean, we spent £250 million trying to make the Green Deal happen a few years ago. We ended up treating less than 15,000 homes. Each of those homes cost the taxpayer nearly 20 grand to do very little to. It would be nice to try and learn the policy lessons in some small places, and maybe the constituency of Ludlow could become a network of places that are pioneering the future. And I'd really like that. So what I'd like you to do now is to reach for your smartphone or your iPad, or to open a browser window on your computer. And I'm just going to share my screen. And when you've got to your device, I'd like you to go to the website www.menti.com, MENTI.com. And when you've gone to that website, there'll be a box where you need to enter a code. And if you see, there's an 8-digit code, 49364047. And then you'll be presented with an ability to vote on 3 options: the enlightened self-interest, the sustained campaigning and lobbying, or the South Shropshire becoming a net zero futures pilot, whatever that means. And you'll see before your eyes 120 people having the opportunity to vote to see what the future should look like. Fantastic. I was really nervous. They say you should never work with children, animals, or Mentimeter, but it seems that this is working.
I think the third one doesn't exclude the second one, or the
no,
first
indeed,
one.
I don't. No, indeed, I think.
I know you don't, but just.
Yeah, I wanted to try and separate them out, but yes, they. Yeah, just to get a flavour for where we think we should be trying to do this, and I don't yet know how we would do this, but using the example of Freeport's, you know, post Brexit, or you know, Letchworth Garden City, or the Rotherwas enterprise zone, clearly it is possible, you know, possibly to change building regulations, or to, you know, perhaps ban the gas boiler 5 years early in the constituency, and support, you know, engineers who might be struggling with that, or to support different ways, or, you know, to give a grant for ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps, or to help the refurbishment of homes to actually understand how that's going to happen, not at the scale of 70 million people, but the scale of a few tens of thousands of people. So we've had 57 people voting.
Could you shout the code again, Richard, please?
Oh yes, 49364047. It's at the top of the slide that you should be able to see, but you might be opening another browser and not be on Zoom anymore.
And could I ask something? Is there a good analysis of the energy usage of actually going online and talking to one another and using the internet?
I presume it's a lot better than the alternative of actually, obviously, if everyone cycled to Ludlow Racecourse and we met there, and yeah, it's difficult to know. We're all heating our homes. It's probably quite complex, but I'd hope to think that this is better. Obviously, there's quite a few people that wouldn't. I mean, we wouldn't have been flying Gladys in or putting her on a canoe and her setting off 9 weeks ago. So yeah, so I think.
But we wouldn't be doing the amount of talking and watching and joining in and watching films by going there, would we? So yes, obviously it's better than going there, but we go everywhere now, whereas we might have just gone somewhere once in a while. I just wondered if there was an analysis of it, because it seems to me it's a use of energy that is never talked about.
No, indeed, but maybe the net benefit of the conversations we've had will outweigh any.
Oh yeah, it wasn't personal.
Yeah. No, not me, but collectively, we're hopefully going to do something wonderful or more things wonderful in the constituency of Ludlow.
I think one comparison could be with Shropshire Council have analysed the difference between home working and people coming into the office, and it makes a massive saving for the council. So you know,
it was the carbon cost that I was thinking about.
Yeah, because a carbon saving for the council.
Oh right.
Yeah, it is this. You know.
Great. Okay, so we basically.
Very quickly.
Oh yes, of course.
I was just going to say there's a project called Carbon Literacy, and they do have some research on the carbon impact of things like sending emails. I'll put it in.
I'll have a look at it, because somebody said something about saving emails uses a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Alan, quickly, and then we will move on. Alan.
Sorry.
You're muted, sir.
I was going to say that the fact is there is a site that's just been said by Noel, so I'm going to shut up.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So 80 people have voted. We've had, I think, a resounding support for the Net Zero Futures pilot, whatever that means. As Jane said, that this doesn't rule out sustained campaigning and lobbying and enlightened self-interest. I think really interesting in terms of the way that's turned out. I hope you didn't think it was unfair the way I presented them in terms of you're not supposed to have a favourite child, are you? But I think clearly number 3 is my favourite. And I haven't voted, but I would now like to take you to one more Mentimeter screen. And this is called a word cloud. And this time, I just need to remove this. There's a different code. So stay on the website and this time enter 49364047. And that will allow you to submit one word that best describes your experience of the conference today. So I'd love, this is a lovely thing quite often. Oops, somebody's put the wrong box in. That's fantastic. So I love watching this unfold. And the larger the word is, the more people are entering that word. So the size of the word represents the most votes for it. So I think inspiring is slightly ahead of hopeful at the moment. Inspirational, encouraging, empowering, insight, constructive, cooperation, provocative, frustrating, impressive. That's lovely. And we've had 61 people. And the lovely thing about this is if you spell the word wrong, it's yours and unique. Says a bad speller. Heartening, exciting potential. I think that's cheating, isn't that 2 words? So lovely. So these are available after the event, so maybe we could capture this and post it on the website. Great. So that's 71 people. I am, given it's 9 seconds to 1 o'clock, going to stop sharing. I think we've clearly heard a call to arms in terms of a way forward, and the group of South Shropshire Climate Action will take on the things that have been said throughout the conference, but most importantly in terms of the end, and essentially try to make that happen, to try and make that future happen early in South Shropshire. Already you've chosen to make that future happen early by going for 2030. I think, yeah, I really strongly believe we shouldn't be trying to do this at the scale of a nation. We should be having lots of experiments to try and work this out, serious experiments, not just little pilots. And we should be actually allowing the building regulations to be different in small places to see what the impact is. There's going to be lots of kickback from big builders and people who that troubles, but yeah, we have to do that because I think lots of benefits will come by going early. I have a few thanks at this particular point in the day. Thanks to the silent but incredibly professional Esme all the way from the Netherlands, who's basically managed the whole Zoom process and spotlighted at the right time. I'd like to give a massive thank you vel to Esme for her fabulous work yet again. So brilliant, Esme. Can you spotlight yourself and say hello, Esme?
Hi there.
She is real. She's not a robot.
No, it was really nice to see everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Esme.
And also to Gladys. I know Gladys isn't with us anymore, but yeah, I think it was fabulous to make that connection. Those 9,147 miles and 10 hours time difference, to actually hear from someone receiving our pollution and the impacts of that pollution. I thought that 0.001% was pretty compelling to try even harder and to live differently. So well done. And Esme, would you kindly bring Jane into the spotlight, please? I want her on the whole screen.
No.
You can't say no.
I can. I can.
No, you can't actually. Esme, could you mute Jane as well, please? So all of this would not be possible without the glorious, energetic, kind of beautiful leadership that Jane has provided to this group. I just think she's the most amazing person who just makes all of this happen, and still doesn't want her time in the spotlight. So on behalf of, well, the group and everybody, I would just like to say such a massive thank you to you, and you deserve a holiday. So round of applause to Jane.
Can I say something? Can I say something?
Yeah, you can. You're allowed.
It's the team. It's the fantastic team. It is team. Really, yeah. It just shows what you can do when you all work together, and it's been fantastic.
Yeah,
joyful.
And if I had the opportunity of having an enormous bunch of sustainable flowers now, I could just pass them across to Jane. But unfortunately, that's not something that Esme's worked out how to do on Zoom. So, so yeah. But thank you.
So you thought you'd embarrass me instead? Thank you.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. So that brings us almost to the end. I would just like to finish with words from Christina Figueres, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And Christina said, "Optimism is not the result of achieving a task we have set for ourselves. That is celebration. Optimism is the necessary input to meeting a challenge." And I hope that we continue to have the optimism that I've seen in spades this morning to take forward the response to the challenge of human-induced climate change in South Shropshire. And I look forward to seeing what happens next. It's been an absolute honour and pleasure to have this opportunity again to cajole and corral all of this. Yeah, I say farewell. I only stole 4 minutes of your Saturday in the end. Thank you very much all. Big round of applause. Could we all unmute ourselves and give a big, fabulous round of applause